Sometimes fate does not offer choices, it corners you. The Stoics believed that when one can no longer control what happens, the only power left is how we respond. And so, when the moment of no return arrived, Elara didn't fight. It wasn't bravery or surrender, it was survival. The hastily concluded ceremony was a blur, a strange, disjointed dream from which Elara couldn't seem to wake. One moment she was the radiant bride, moments from her fairy tale ending. The next, a pawn in a stranger's game, uttering vows to a man whose eyes held galaxies of secrets. Damien Thorne, her husband. The name felt alien on her tongue, a bitter pill swallowed in the chaos. What had she done? What choice did she truly have? The alternative, public ruin, the whispers and stares, the utter desolation of being so thoroughly discarded, was a precipice she couldn't face. So she'd nodded, a barely perceptible movement that had sealed an unimaginable fate. Now, the iron gates of Shadowfen Manor clanged shut behind the sleek black car that had spirited her away from the celestial Grand Hotel. Each resounding clang felt like a bar dropping into place, a premonition of her new life, her gilded cage. But it wasn't just the cold, formidable grandeur of the sprawling estate that chilled Elara to the bone. It was the oppressive silence, a quiet so profound it seemed to swallow sound, heavy with unspoken Thorne family secrets. And then there was the unnerving discovery she would soon make, a discovery that would whisper of darker currents beneath the polished veneer of the Thorne dynasty. Shadowfen Manor loomed before her, a Gothic masterpiece of dark stone and sprawling ivy, its many windows like vacant eyes staring out over meticulously manicured yet eerily still grounds. Opulent, yes. Vast, undoubtedly. But welcoming? Not in the slightest. It felt like a mausoleum, a monument to wealth and power, not a home. Damien, her new, enigmatic husband, was as distant and formal as the house itself. He led her through echoing halls, his footsteps unnervingly silent on the marble floors, to a guest suite that was larger than her entire Veridia city apartment. Luxurious, certainly, with priceless antiques and silks that shimmered in the dim light, but it felt utterly isolated. A beautifully appointed prison cell. "This is yours," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection, his gaze sweeping the room as if cataloging its contents rather than acknowledging her presence. "We will discuss arrangements later." Arrangements? What did that even mean? Were they talking about their marriage? Or her role in this elaborate charade? But he offered no further explanation, turning on his heel and leaving her alone with the suffocating silence and 1,000 unanswered questions. How could a place so grand feel so empty? Days bled into a monotonous routine. Elara explored Shadowfen Manor cautiously, always feeling like an intruder, a ghost haunting its hallowed halls. She soon noticed a particular wing of the manor, tucked away at the end of a long, shadowed corridor that seemed strangely off-limits. A heavy, ornate door, carved with an intricate design she couldn't quite decipher, was always locked. No staff ever seemed to venture near it. When she'd casually inquired about it with a passing maid, the young woman had paled, muttered something about it being Mr. Damien's private area, and scurried away. The locked wing became a focal point for Elara's unease, a tangible symbol of the secrets this house, this family, seemed determined to keep. What was hidden behind that door? Her first family dinner was an exercise in thinly veiled hostility. Isolde Thorne, Damien's mother and the glacial matriarch of the Thorne Empire, presided over the long, polished mahogany table like a queen holding court. Her silver-gray eyes, so like Damien's, yet entirely without his occasional flicker of unreadable emotion, raked over Elara with an expression of undisguised contempt. "Some women," Isolde had remarked, her voice a silken rasp as she addressed no one in particular, yet everyone at the table, are remarkably adept at landing on their feet, regardless of the circumstances. A curious talent. The barb was clearly aimed at Elara. Damien, seated at the head of the table, remained impassive, his face a mask of aristocratic indifference, though Elara thought she saw a muscle tighten in his jaw. Did he ever show what he was truly feeling? The tension was a constant, simmering beneath the surface of every interaction, every shared space. Elara often overheard hushed, tense arguments drifting from behind the closed doors of Damien's study, snippets of conversations between him and Isolde, revolving around the hasty marriage, the corporate image of Thorne Global Enterprises, and the potential fallout. Elara felt utterly alone. a pariah in this fortress of wealth. She tried calling her best friend, Zara Kazmi, her lifeline to the outside world, to sanity, but the calls felt stilted, the connection strained by the invisible walls of Shadowfen. How could she explain the oppressive atmosphere, the undercurrents of something wrong? And yet, amidst the coldness and isolation, Damien began to make small, almost imperceptible gestures that pricked at Elara's confusion. One morning, a rare, leather-bound art book on early 20th century photography appeared on the console table in her suite. Another day, a small tin of her favorite, rather obscure chamomile and lavender tea was placed beside her teacup at breakfast. No note, no explanation, just these quiet acknowledgments of her. These flickers of thoughtfulness, so at odds with his otherwise cold, formal demeanor, were deeply unsettling. Was this kindness, or another calculated move in a game she didn't understand? It made Damien even more of an enigma, a complex puzzle she couldn't begin to solve. One particularly bleak evening, restlessness drove Elara from her suite. She found Damien in the vast, two-story library, a silhouette against the roaring fire in the enormous stone hearth. He was staring into the flames, a glass of amber liquid cradled in his hand, looking less like the powerful CEO and more like a man burdened by the weight of the world. He didn't startle as she approached, as if he'd sensed her presence. "This family," he began, his voice low, roughened by something she couldn't name. "We are not what we seem, Elara." He turned slowly, his gray eyes, usually so unreadable, now reflecting the firelight, holding a depth of weariness that surprised her. "Marcus was always a fool," he continued, a raw edge to his tone. "A charming, reckless fool. But this marriage, it was to protect the Thorn name." Elara's heart thudded. "Protect it from what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The air crackled with unspoken things. "And what about me, Damien? Where do I fit into this protection?" He took a step closer, the scent of old books and expensive whiskey clinging to him. His eyes, those intense, unreadable eyes, locked onto hers. "You, Elara," he said, his voice a soft, dangerous murmur, "are now part of the protection." The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Protection from what? Or was she merely a pawn? A beautiful, well-kept piece in a game far larger and more sinister than she could ever imagine. The strange, recurring motif she'd begun to notice throughout the manor. A stylized black orchid, subtly woven into tapestries, carved into furniture, even embossed on the spine of the photography book he'd given her, suddenly felt less like a design choice and more like a symbol, a silent, watching presence. What did it signify? And what secrets did it guard within the cold stone walls of Shadowfen Manor? The question of protection haunted her, a chilling echo in the vast emptiness of her new life. The heavy question of Damien's motives, the chilling implication that she was merely part of the protection, settled over Elara like the ever-present gloom of Shadowfen Manor. Days turned into weeks, each one a slow crawl through a labyrinth of gilded cages and unspoken Thorn family secrets. She felt it, didn't she? This gnawing unease, the sense that every corner of the estate, every polite smile from the staff, every glance from Isolde Thorn concealed a hidden meaning. She was determined not to be a passive victim in this opulent drama. Elara began to subtly investigate the Thorns, her photographer's eye for detail now focused on deciphering the clues scattered around her. The black orchid motif became an obsession. It was everywhere, from the antique wallpaper in a disused drawing room to the intricate carving on an old family portrait in the grand gallery. The portrait depicted a woman with haunting eyes and an unsmiling mouth, a single black orchid pinned to her dark gown. Who was she? And why did the sight of her send a shiver down Elara's spine? One late afternoon, drawn by an irresistible pull, Elara found herself once again standing before the imposing library door. A hushed conversation, sharp and venomous, seeped through the heavy oak. It was Isolde and Damien. A slipped confession was about to shatter Elara's already fractured world yet again. The truth about Marcus, a secret lover, the real, cynical reason for her almost marriage. It was all about to come crashing down, but could Damien's unexpected defense of her ignite a spark of defiance? You have to wonder, don't you, what twists fate still had in store? She was a nobody, Damien. Isolde's voice was a low hiss, cold and sharp as shattered ice. A placeholder for Marcus until he tired of his Indiscretions. This ridiculous marriage is a farce, a desperate attempt to protect Thorn Global after his latest, and might I add, most public scandal. Elara pressed her ear closer, her breath catching in her throat. Placeholder? Indiscretions? Then came Damien's voice, equally low, but edged with a cold fury that made the hairs on Elara's arms stand on end. Elara is not a placeholder, Mother. Marcus was weak. He had a mistress for years. He had gambling debts the size of a small European nation. He never intended to marry Elara, or anyone for that matter. You pressured him for the merger with Sterling Consolidated, and you know it. Elara was simply the most suitable candidate to present a facade of stability. A corporate pawn. The words slammed into Elara with the force of a physical blow. Her love for Marcus, the future she'd envisioned, all a lie, a carefully constructed illusion to facilitate a business deal. The heartbreak was a fresh, agonizing wound, quickly followed by a burning tide of anger. How could they be so callous, so manipulative? Damien continued, his voice dropping further, almost to a growl. She deserves better than Marcus could ever offer. Far better. I married her to shield her from the inevitable fallout of his implosion, not to trap her entirely in our complexities. Shield her? Or imprison her further? The distinction felt terrifyingly blurry. Later that evening, the weight of the overheard conversation pressing down on her, Elara confronted Damien in his study. The room, like the rest of the manor, was impeccably furnished, dominated by a massive mahogany desk and shelves groaning with leather-bound volumes. He didn't look up as she entered, his attention fixed on a complex financial report spread before him. Was any of it real? Elara's voice trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze when he finally lifted his head. The photography books? The tea? Or was that just part of the shielding? A flicker of something unreadable crossed Damien's face. Regret? Or was it just irritation at being disturbed? My initial motive, he began, his tone measured, was indeed damage control for Thorn Global Enterprises. Marcus's irresponsibility threatened to unravel years of work. He paused, his gray eyes studying her intently. However, my perception of you, Elara, is evolving. He actually sounded sincere. You are resilient. Far more than anyone in this family, myself included, initially gave you credit for. Resilient. Was that all she was to him? A surprisingly durable pawn? The media storm predictably erupted with renewed ferocity. Jilted bride marries billionaire brother, gold digger or hapless victim, screamed one headline. The Thorn Triangle, love lies and corporate intrigue, blared another. Paparazzi became a constant, unwelcome presence at the gates of Shadowfen Manor. Elara felt exposed, dissected under the harsh glare of public opinion. Her life turned into a sordid soap opera for mass consumption. The whispers followed her even within the supposed sanctuary of the manor. The staff's previously deferential glances now tinged with curiosity and, she suspected, pity. It was almost unbearable. What right did the world have to judge her, to pick apart her pain? Her only true lifeline was Zara Kazmi, her fiercely loyal friend called daily, her voice a welcome anchor of sanity in Elara's swirling vortex of confusion and despair. During one such call, Zara shared some unsettling intel. Listen, Elara, Zara said, her voice low and urgent. There are some persistent rumors circulating about Thorn Global's finances. Whispers that things are much shakier than they appear on the surface. And get this, someone's been feeding me anonymous tips about your new family. Highly specific, very damaging stuff. I don't know who it is yet, but they seem to have an axe to grind with the Thorns. An anonymous tipper? Another layer of intrigue in the already convoluted Thorn saga. Who could it be? And what did they want? The questions swirled in Elara's mind, adding to her growing sense of dread. Trapped in the gilded cage of Shadowfen, suffocating under the weight of secrets and scandal, Elara knew she needed an escape, a purpose. She couldn't let the Thorns or the voracious media define her. Photography had always been her solace, her way of making sense of the world. And so, an idea began to take root. She would use her skills, her passion, to create something positive, something real, something entirely her own. She decided to start a free photography workshop for underprivileged youth in a struggling Veridia city neighborhood, a world away from the opulent emptiness of Shadowfen. It would be a place where creativity could flourish, where young voices could find expression, a place where she could perhaps find herself again, beyond the tarnished identity of Mrs. Damien Thorne. From afar, Damien observed her burgeoning project. He made no comment, offered no overt support, yet Elara occasionally found new, high-quality cameras and art supplies discreetly delivered to the community center. No note, no explanation. Just his silent, enigmatic presence, a flicker of what might have been admiration in his usually guarded eyes. Was this another calculated move? Or was it possible that the cold, calculating CEO of Thorne Global Enterprises was capable of kindness? The thought was as terrifying as it was tantalizing. She was forging a new path, but the shadows of the thorns and the ever-present black orchid were never far behind. And the question still lingered. What would happen when her newfound purpose collided with the secrets Damien was still so fiercely protecting? The ground beneath her feet felt dangerously unstable. One wrong step, and she feared she might fall into an abyss from which there would be no return. The truth, she suspected, was a far more dangerous game than she had ever imagined. And she was right in the middle of it. Don't you just wonder what she'll uncover next? Just as a sliver of peace, a fragile sense of purpose, began to emerge from the wreckage of Elara's life. The past always has a way of returning, doesn't it? Her newfound sanctuary, the photography workshop buzzing with the children's laughter and creativity, was about to be violently challenged. One bright Saturday morning, the Veridia city sun streaming through the grimy windows of the community center, Elara was helping a young girl named Maya adjust the focus on an old donated camera. The room was alive, a vibrant chaos of excited chatter and clicking shutters. Suddenly, the door burst open with a force that rattled the window panes. Silence descended like a suffocating blanket. Every child froze, their innocent eyes wide with alarm. Standing silhouetted in the doorway was Marcus Thorne. His handsome face, once the object of Elara's adoration, was now a twisted mask of fury and bitter entitlement. Can you even imagine the audacity to show up there in her space? Marcus Thorne's venomous return ignited a fresh hellfire of scandal, a media storm more vicious than before. But this time, Damien Thorne wouldn't just watch from the shadows of Shadowfen Manor. Oh no. His explosive public defense of Elara at the Thorne Global headquarters wasn't just a declaration of war against his own blood, his own brother. It was a confession, a revelation so stunning it would leave the entirety of Veridia City gasping for breath. And you won't want to miss a single, electrifying detail of what happens next. Marcus stalked into the room, his expensive shoes crunching on the worn linoleum floor. His gaze, cold and hard as chips of ice, swept dismissively over the children before locking onto Elara. So, this is where the little gold digger hides when she's not scheming her way into my family's fortune, he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. Several of the older children gasped, instinctively moving to shield the younger ones. Elara's heart tightened, a familiar ache of betrayal mixed with a new, surprising surge of protective anger. She stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the children. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" she asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the tremor that ran through her. This was her place, her sanctuary. He had no right. "I'm here to set the record straight," he spat, taking another menacing step. "You think you've won, don't you? Marrying my brother? You manipulated him. You planned this all along, you conniving little nobody." "You're wrong, Marcus," Elara said firmly, her chin held high. The resilience Damien had spoken of, she felt it now, a steel rod in her spine. "I never used you. I never manipulated Damien. You made your choices. You abandoned me. I'm building something real here, something you wouldn't understand, and I won't let your bitterness ruin it." His laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. "Oh, people will believe me, darling. Who do you think they'll trust? A nobody from the slums, or a thorn?" He gestured around the humble community center with a look of profound disgust. The air crackled with tension. Some of the children clutched their cameras like shields, but Elara didn't back down. "I'm here for these kids, Marcus," she stated, her voice ringing with conviction. "And I won't let your poison touch them. Now, please leave." Of course, lurking paparazzi, like vultures sensing a fresh kill, had followed Marcus. The confrontation, every ugly word, every flash of raw emotion, was captured, disseminated, and sensationalized within hours. New headlines screamed across the digital landscape. Thorne brothers at war over scheming bride. and bitter ex accuses Elara Thorne of master manipulation. The online trolls, emboldened by Marcus's accusations, launched a fresh wave of relentless attacks, questioning Elara's character, her motives, her very existence. The carefully constructed piece she had begun to build around her photography workshop crumbled. Some parents, frightened by the negative attention and the Thorne family drama, pulled their children from the program. The sting of public judgment, the weight of whispers and sideways glances, it was a heavy burden. Elara was devastated, but a core of defiance burned within her. She wouldn't give up. Not on the kids, not on herself. Damien witnessed the toll it was taking on her. He saw the shadows under her eyes, the forced brightness of her smile. And something within him, something he'd kept locked away for years, finally snapped. Without consulting Isolde, without a word to his board of directors, he called an emergency press conference at the gleaming, imposing headquarters of Thorne Global Enterprises. The room was packed, a feeding frenzy of reporters and cameras, all eager for the next sordid chapter in the Thorne saga. What would the stoic CEO say? Would he denounce his wife? Defend his brother? Damien Thorne stepped up to the podium, his bespoke suit immaculate, his expression calm but resolute, a glint of steel in his gray eyes. Veridia City held its breath. "I am here today," Damien began, his voice amplified by the microphones cutting through the expectant hush, "to address the false and frankly pathetic accusations made against my wife, Elara Vayne Thorne." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "My brother, Marcus Thorne, has painted a picture of her that is a grotesque distortion of the truth. His claims are lies, born from his own profound bitterness, his own failures, and his own staggering selfishness." A collective gasp rippled through the room. This was unprecedented. Family loyalty was paramount in the Thorne dynasty. "Elara is not a schemer," Damien continued, his voice gaining strength, resonating with an undeniable conviction. "She is a woman of profound integrity, remarkable strength, and a heart I am only beginning to comprehend. I married her because she deserved protection from my brother's recklessness, from the consequences of his actions, and I married her because..." He paused, and for a moment, the unflappable Damien Thorne looked almost vulnerable. "Because I have come to admire her deeply, more than I can say." The room erupted in murmurs. This was more than a defense, it was a public declaration. He then proceeded, with cold, irrefutable precision, to reveal documented evidence of Marcus's long-term affair, his mountains of gambling debts, exposing the full, sordid extent of his younger brother's deceit. "The only schemer in this equation," Damien concluded, his voice like ice, "is Marcus." Isolde Thorne, seated in the front row, a silent, regal figure of disapproval, was visibly shaken. Her face remained an icy mask, but the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her perfectly manicured hand betrayed her shock, her fury at Damien's public defiance, his shattering of the carefully constructed Thorne facade. The family loyalty was broken. The battle lines were drawn. Later, in the quiet antechamber backstage, away from the flashing cameras and clamoring reporters, Damien found Elara. She was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. "I meant what I said, Elara," he said softly, his voice for her ears alone. "All of it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, unassuming black velvet box. Not a lavish diamond, not the ostentatious jewels favored by Thorne women. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a simple, antique silver ring, intricately engraved with a tiny, detailed black orchid. This belonged to someone who understood what it meant to be an outsider in this family, Damien said, his voice husky. "She was resilient, like you." He met her gaze, and for the first time, Elara saw not the enigmatic CEO, but the man. The black orchid, for her, symbolized that resilience, a quiet defiance. Perhaps it can symbolize a new beginning for us." Elara was stunned into silence. His vulnerability, the unexpected tenderness in his voice, the profound significance of the black orchid meaning now laid bare. It was overwhelming. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked from the ring to his searching face. A new beginning? Could it be possible? Could this silver ring, this emblem of a shared understanding, truly be the key to unlocking a future she hadn't dared to imagine? The battle was far from over, she knew. Isolde's silent fury was a storm gathering on the horizon, but for the first time since that disastrous wedding day, Elara felt a flicker, not just of hope, but of something far more powerful: connection. Tears welled in Elara's eyes as she stared at the simple silver ring, the intricately engraved black orchid, a stark contrast to the ostentatious jewels favored by the Thorn women. The battle Damien had waged in that press conference, the public declaration of support, it was overwhelming. The black orchid, once a chilling symbol of Shadowfen Manor's cold secrets and her own unease, now felt like a fragile bud of hope, a testament to shared resilience. "A new beginning," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, as she looked up at Damien, truly seeing him, perhaps for the very first time, not as the enigmatic CEO or the brother of her betrayer, but as a man marked by his own scars, a man offering a tentative hand across a chasm of mistrust. But could they truly escape the suffocating weight of the Thorn legacy, the relentless glare of Veridia City's insatiable appetite for scandal? Could this fragile connection withstand the storms yet to come? You just knew this wasn't over, right? The Thorns didn't just fade into the background. And indeed, their public victory at the press conference was a powerful blow. But the war for their future, for their sanity, was far from over. Isolde Thorn, publicly undermined by her own son, was not a woman to accept defeat gracefully. Her silent fury, witnessed by Elara in the subtle clench of her jaw and the icy glitter in her eyes during the press conference, was a storm gathering force on the horizon. A few days later, the summons came. Not a polite request, but a command delivered on heavy cream cardstock embossed with the Thorn family crest. Isolde Thorn requested Elara's presence in the West Drawing Room. The West Drawing Room. Chills ran down Elara's spine. It was adjacent to the mysterious locked wing. Isolde Thorn, cornered and radiating a furious, dangerous energy, finally revealed the dark, tragic secret behind that locked wing of Shadowfen Manor. It was a story more chilling than Elara could have imagined, a narrative deeply intertwined with the haunting motif of the Black Orchid and the family's ruthless, unyielding ambition. This gut-wrenching revelation would force Elara and Damien to confront the true, terrible cost of being a Thorn. And it would test their fragile, burgeoning bond to its absolute limit. Would they find the strength to exchange vows that were truly their own, or would the family's darkest truths finally shatter them? The air in the drawing room was thick with unspoken menace. "You've caused quite the disruption, Elara," Isolde began, her voice deceptively soft, yet laced with steel. She gestured towards the infamous locked door at the far end of the room. "I believe it's time you understood the true nature of the family you've so forcefully inserted yourself into." To Elara's astonishment, Isolde produced an antique key and, with a click that echoed in the oppressive silence, unlocked the heavy, ornate door. What lay beyond was a revelation that would change everything. The room was an artist's studio, frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light filtering through a grimy, arched window. Canvases, some blank, others covered in vibrant, melancholic paintings, leaned against the walls. And everywhere were black orchids, depicted in various states of bloom and decay, their dark velvety petals rendered with an almost painful intensity. The air was thick with the scent of old turpentine and something else, sorrow. "This," Isolde said, her voice devoid of emotion, "belonged to my sister-in-law, Elara Thorn, Damien's aunt." She paused, her gaze fixed on a haunting self-portrait of a woman with eyes that mirrored Damien's in their depth, but held an unbearable sadness. Lyra was an artist, a true talent, but she had the misfortune of falling in love with a man deemed beneath her by my late husband. She defied him. She married for love. Isolde's lip curled. "The Thorns protect their own, Elara, vehemently, and they destroy those who threaten the legacy or who dare to defy the established order." Lyra met a tragic, mysterious end, an accident, they called it. Her spirit, her defiance, was too much for this family to bear. The black orchid was her mark, her signature, a symbol of her untamed spirit and her profound sorrow. Isolde turned then, her eyes pinning Elara with a chilling warning. "Damien may believe he feels something for you now. He may even believe he can protect you. But this family, Elara, it consumes everything in its path. Every light, every hope. Do you understand?" Elara was shaken to her core. The tragic family story, the weight of Lyra's fate, Isolde's undisguised threat, it was a brutal, visceral confirmation of her deepest fears. The locked wing mystery was solved, but the resolution offered no comfort, only a deeper understanding of the darkness that lurked beneath the Thorne family's glittering facade. But Isolde had misjudged her. The revelation didn't break Elara, it solidified her resolve. She found Damien later that day, staring out over the bleak, windswept gardens of Shadowfen. She told him about the meeting, about Lyra's studio, about Isolde's chilling words. Damien listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he turned to her, and the mask he usually wore seemed to crack. "Lyra, she was my confidante," he confessed, his voice raw with a pain that was clearly decades old. "She understood the gilded cage of this family. Her fate. It made me cynical about love, about family, about everything. I swore I would never become like them, like my father, like Isolde." He looked at Elara then, a desperate vulnerability in his eyes. "I never wanted them to break me, or anyone else." This shared vulnerability, this glimpse into his own wounded past, brought them closer than ever before. The carefully constructed walls between them began to crumble. In that moment of shared pain and understanding, a new path forward began to emerge. They decided then and there to have a second wedding ceremony. Not for Veridia City's gossip columns, not for the Thorne corporate image, but for themselves. A quiet, intensely private ceremony in the neglected, overgrown south gardens of Shadowfen Manor, a forgotten corner of the estate that Elara had recently begun to tend, coaxing new life from the dormant soil. Only Zara, her ever-faithful friend, was there. And surprisingly, a handful of the children from Elara's photography workshop, their bright, innocent faces a stark contrast to the somber history of Shadowfen. Damien stood waiting for her, not in a stiff tuxedo, but in a simple linen shirt, the usual sharpness of his features softened by the dappled sunlight filtering through the ancient trees. As Elara approached, wearing a simple white dress she'd found tucked away in a vintage shop, the black orchid ring gleaming on her finger, their eyes met. And in that gaze, years of pain, misunderstanding, and cautious hope seemed to coalesce. They exchanged heartfelt vows, simple words promising honesty, partnership, and a commitment to face the future, whatever it may hold, together. It wasn't a grand declaration, but a quiet, genuine moment of love and commitment, a healing balm on old wounds. As they spoke their vows, Elara noticed a single, perfect black orchid, a robe bloom amidst the wildflowers she'd planted, unfurling its velvety petals in the sunlight. A symbol, perhaps, not of sorrow, but of their shared journey towards a new, resilient love. This was their real wedding, the true beginning of their story. But even as this fragile peace settled around them, a frantic call from Zara shattered the quiet. "Elara, Damien, the anonymous tipper, I think I know who it is. And believe me, it changes everything about Thorne Global's supposed stability, and it might just bring the whole damn empire crashing down." The news hung in the air, a chilling reminder that the outside world and the intricate, venomous machinations of the Thorne family were ever present, lurking just beyond the fragile sanctuary of their garden vows. One last secret remained, and it was about to explode with the force of a well-placed bomb. What could it be? And could their newfound partnership withstand this final, devastating revelation? The fragile peace Elara and Damien had found in the sun-dappled gardens of Shadowfen Manor, amidst their quiet vows and the unexpected bloom of a single black orchid, was destined to be short-lived. After all, this was the Thorne dynasty, wasn't it? A family whose secrets had secrets. Zara's frantic call, "Elara, Damien, the anonymous tipper, I think I know who it is, and believe me, it changes everything about Thorne Global's supposed stability, and it might just bring the whole damn empire crashing down," had cast an immediate, chilling shadow over their newfound serenity. One last, devastating secret remained, and it was about to explode with the force of a meticulously placed bomb, threatening to obliterate not just Thorne Global, but the very foundations of their new beginning. Could their love, forged in fire and scandal, withstand this final, cataclysmic test? Or would the Thorne legacy ultimately consume them both? You have to be on the edge of your seat, wondering what's coming, right? The final Thorne secret, when it finally detonated, was more shocking, more insidious than Elara could have ever conceived. It implicated not just Marcus, not just the desperate measures taken to cover his recklessness, but an unexpected and far more powerful family member. The anonymous tipper, Zara revealed with a grim satisfaction that even Elara could appreciate, was a disgruntled former Thorn Global chief financial officer. He hadn't been working alone. Oh no. He'd partnered with a lesser-known, oft-overlooked Thorn cousin, a quiet, resentful man whom Marcus had spectacularly double-crossed in a previous business venture, leaving him financially ruined and hungry for revenge. Their combined motive? To expose Isolde Thorn's long-hidden, yet deeply illegal financial manipulations. For years, it turned out, Isolde had been systematically cooking the books, artificially inflating Thorn Global's value, all to cover Marcus's ever-escalating gambling debts and disastrous business decisions. The merger Damien had mentioned, the one Elara was supposed to be a pawn in, it was a desperate bid by Isolde to absorb a healthier company and mask the rot within Thorn Global. The depth of the deceit was staggering. The revelation, when Zara's meticulously researched expose hit the Veridia City Chronicle's front page, caused an immediate and catastrophic corporate crisis. Thorn Global's stock plummeted. Federal investigators swarmed the headquarters. Isolde Thorn, the Ice Queen, the untouchable matriarch, was directly implicated in massive fraud and insider trading. Marcus, already disgraced, found himself facing a fresh wave of legal troubles that threatened to bury him for good. The Thorn Empire, built on generations of ruthless ambition and carefully guarded secrets, was on the verge of complete and utter collapse. Could anything survive this? This crisis became the ultimate test of Elara and Damien's love, their partnership, and their courage. They were no longer just navigating personal scandal. They were at the epicenter of a corporate earthquake threatening to swallow them whole. But for Elara and Damien, now truly united by shared trauma, shared vulnerability, and a love that had been unexpectedly forged in the crucible of adversity, this was also their chance. Their chance to redefine the tarnished Thorn legacy, to prove that their story was more than just another sordid headline. It was a testament to resilience, to the search for truth, and to a love that refused to be extinguished. Damien, with Elara unexpectedly, yet resolutely by his side, faced the board of Thorn Global. He faced the furious stockholders, he faced the relentless media, and he didn't hide, he didn't dissemble. He laid bare the truth, the full, ugly extent of his family's corruption. It was a brutal, painful confession, but it was honest. Then he proposed something truly radical, a complete and transparent restructuring of Thorn Global. He pledged to cooperate fully with investigators to implement sweeping ethical reforms, even if it meant significant initial losses, even if it meant dismantling parts of the empire his ancestors had built. It was a gamble that could mean the end of everything, or just maybe a new beginning. Elara, meanwhile, found her own way to fight back, to reclaim the narrative. She used her photography, her art, not to sensationalize, but to humanize. Her powerful, poignant images documented the real people affected by Thorn Global's corporate greed, the employees facing uncertainty, the small investors who had lost their savings. But she also captured images of hope, of resilience, of the potential for positive change within the Veridia City community that the Thorns had for so long callously disregarded. Her work, initially met with cynicism, slowly began to shift public perception, offering a narrative beyond the scandal, a glimpse of a different kind of future. Months passed. Months of grueling legal battles, of painful restructuring, of relentless public scrutiny. But slowly, painstakingly, things began to change. Thorn Global, though smaller, emerged from the wreckage more stable, more respected, its foundations rebuilt on a bedrock of truth and transparency. Isolde Thorn, her power diminished, her reputation in tatters, retreated from public life, a recluse in a far-flung corner of Shadowfen Manor. Marcus, stripped of his wealth and status, was finally facing the legal consequences of his actions. His downfall was complete. A cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms and back alleys of Veridia City. And what of Elara and Damien? Their community impact was undeniable. Elara's photography workshop thrived, a vibrant hub of creativity and hope in a neighborhood long overlooked. She was already making plans to open a small gallery, a space dedicated to showcasing local artists, to giving voice to the voiceless. Shadowfen Manor, once a symbol of her gilded cage, began to transform. The oppressive silence was gradually replaced by the sounds of life. The laughter of the workshop children during occasional weekend visits, The lively discussions as Elara and Damien planned community events, the soft murmur of their own shared dreams. The black orchid motif, once so ominous, now seemed to carry a different symbolism. Resilience, yes, but also the beauty that can emerge from darkness, the strength found in embracing even the most painful truths. They were no longer seen as Veridia City's most scandalous couple, but as true partners. A team who had faced unimaginable adversity and had chosen integrity, chosen each other, over the easy path of denial and deceit. The final scene of their public drama wasn't a courtroom or a boardroom, but the sun-drenched south gardens of Shadowfen Manor. They were working side by side, sketching out plans for a community arts festival they intended to host there, transforming a symbol of Thorn exclusivity into a beacon of inclusivity. Elara, her hands smudged with charcoal, looked up at Damien, her love and trust for him shining in her eyes. A quiet, unshakable confidence that had been so painfully earned. "We did it," she said, a soft smile playing on her lips. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady, his answering smile genuine, reaching deep into his gray eyes, finally chasing away the last of the shadows. "We did, Elara. Together." The simple silver ring, with its intricately engraved black orchid, gleamed on her finger, a quiet, constant reminder of their tumultuous journey, of the new beginnings they had fought so hard to achieve. Their love story wasn't a traditional fairy tale, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was real. It was hard-won, and it was undeniably, beautifully, and irrevocably theirs. And sometimes isn't that the best kind of happily ever after? The kind you build yourself from the ashes of the old into something stronger, truer, and infinitely more precious? Dear friend, life has a way of testing us in the moments we least expect, casting us into roles we never chose, in places we never dreamed we'd end up. Elara's sudden entanglement in the Thorn legacy is not just a story of broken plans and veiled secrets. It's a reflection of how often we must find strength amid uncertainty. The Stoics remind us that it's not the events themselves that define us, but our response to them. Elara's resolve to face the silence of Shadowfen, the icy distance of Damien, and the mystery behind the black orchid, all while questioning her place in this grand facade, is a quiet kind of bravery. In every whispered doubt and cold hallway, she chooses not collapse but confrontation. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step toward reclaiming not just her voice, but her power. Remember, sometimes the cage is just a chrysalis. If this story moved you, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps bring more